Well, hello, and I want to thank the Pacifica Institute for having me here today, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and hear me talk. You've heard a little bit about my background. I have been in law enforcement. I was adding it up now. If you subtract out the 1 year I was retired, I think it's about 34 years. And you're supposed to say, oh my God, you don't look that old. But yeah, I started very young. A lot of people always ask, how did you get into law enforcement? And if you saw 1976, there weren't a lot of women in law enforcement, and it was still a relatively new concept, particularly women who would be out in a police car actually doing those types of duties. That was relatively new. I kind of stumbled into it. I didn't grow up as a little girl thinking I'm going to be a police officer someday. I was putting myself through college, community college, of which I'm a big fan. When you don't have the money, community college is great. And so I was working in a pharmacy and going to school at night. And a friend of mine that I was working with, a coworker, said the Los Angeles County is hiring secretaries, and they paid more money than I was getting paid. So I thought that's an opportunity. So I applied to the County of Los Angeles, not the LA County Sheriff's Department, but the County of Los Angeles. And by serendipity, I got picked up in the Sheriff's Department, and I was working out of Pico Rivera Station in LA as a patrol secretary. And what I would do is I would take the arrests, they would bring in the arrests, and I would type. I'm showing my age. There were no computers. I would type in the bookings and the warrant broadcast, and I started to learn about police work. And then I went over to another station, Linwood Station, over in the South Central area of the county, a new contract for LA County Sheriffs, where I was the Detective Bureau secretary. And then I learned, beyond the arrest, the investigation side. And so the detectives would call me back to take dictation because they were intrigued. I was going to school to be a court reporter. They were intrigued by this machine where I would sit there and take the dictation. I could have written it out longhand because they talk very slowly, but they wanted me back there with the machine. But I learned how they did their job. I would not have applied to be a deputy sheriff had someone there, a couple of the detectives said, why don't you apply to be a deputy sheriff? And I think to this day, had they not mentioned that to me or suggested that to me, I don't think I would be standing here today. And if you would have told me that I was going to be the sheriff of Orange County someday, I would have requested that you get a psychiatric evaluation. That would never, never happen. But here I am. I was appointed in 2008, and to take you back, the prior sheriff had been indicted and tried and found guilty of witness tampering. So I applied along with 47 other candidates to a search firm, and ultimately 9 of us were interviewed in front of the Board of Supervisors, and it got down to 2 of us, and I was selected on a resounding 3-2 vote. And so I had to serve as an appointed sheriff, and if you recall, if you live in the county, you heard me referred to as the appointed sheriff until I did run for election against 2 candidates and won. So I came into an organization that the top half was virtually gone, and I really had to start from square one inside a department that I had never worked. It's like going into a business, taking over, and now you're the CEO, and you don't know who any of the players are. And I know there's several of you in business that understand what that's all about, except my folks carry guns. And so I had a lot of work to do. I've been in there. It'll be 4 years in June that I will have been in office. And so let me tell you a little bit about what the Orange County Sheriff's Department does. And I was asked to speak about some issues that we're facing in law enforcement right now, and there's quite a few. But the Orange County Sheriff's Department, we have about 3,800 people, you heard, about half and half, half sworn and half civilian. Law enforcement over the years has civilianized a lot of positions, any position that we can that doesn't require someone who's trained in police work. We have civilianized because it saves the taxpayers dollars and it provides some continuity in those positions. We have 12 contract cities. So 12 cities have chosen, instead of having their own police department, they contract with the sheriff's department. And we are typically about 50% cheaper because of all the overhead. If you think about it, if you start your own police department, you have to have communications, you have to have homicide detectives, you have to have bomb details, you have to have all these specialized services that you may never use. And so the advantage of the sheriff's department is that we have those available, and we use them across the board in all of our contract cities. And we are also responsible for the unincorporated county, which is about 150,000 people in the unincorporated areas. We also provide by contract, and when I say contract, we're not making a profit. We just charge those customers what it costs us to provide the service. By law, we cannot make a profit on that. We can only recover our costs. And so we also have a contract with the courts. If you go into the court, if you are lucky enough to get picked for jury duty, you will go through airport-type screening to get into our courts. And you will see a deputy dressed like I am in the courtrooms. Why? A lot of people would ask. Courtrooms are very volatile areas. People get sentenced to crimes, family court, children get taken away, highly emotional types of situations that occur. And you would be surprised the things that people bring in to courts. You would think we have big signs that you're subject to search, but we've had people bring in knives, guns, corkscrews, you know, you name it. And so if you're ever in there and you're bored, ask the deputy, can I see the board of all the stuff you've taken away from people? And they've got a big old board over there that will show you. We also have a contract with the airport. So I like to say we are the people that are out by the curb telling you to keep your car moving, but they're also doing other things, obviously. They're working inside the airport and around the exterior, the perimeter of the airport, to make sure that it's secure. We are not the ones that make you take off your shoes. That is the TSA. We don't involve ourselves in that. But it's a very dynamic operation out there as well. And I have some, in addition to some of our deputy sheriffs, we also have what's called sheriff special officers, and we have a lot of volunteers who you will see in jackets with a emblem of the sheriff's department, but they're volunteers. They don't get paid anything, and they just assist us, eyes and ears, on what's happening at our airport to make sure it's secure. We also have a contract with the Orange County Transportation Authority. That's all the buses, the transportation systems. Those buses are all outfitted with cameras, so we have issues on the buses. We typically have a video of that, so if you're going to commit a crime, don't do it on the buses. They're very well covered. And we do have deputy sheriffs undercover and in uniform going on and off the buses, and then also patrolling those lines to make sure that the workers are safe and the passengers are safe. And we also are involved in the Metrolink operation as well. We patrol 42 miles of coastline in the harbor, the 3 harbors in Orange County, and that is in addition to firefighting. They also are firefighters, and they work on crimes that occur in those areas. It also is Homeland Security function. You have probably seen in the papers the Ponga boats that we have been finding along our shorelines that are transporting narcotics and human cargo into the county. And so they're very busy. We work hand in hand with the Coast Guard, and our responsibility is 3 miles out, and the Coast Guard is responsible for beyond that. Now, does that mean we don't go beyond the 3 mile? No. We work together with the Coast Guard and help them in their mission because they're pretty stretched out across the coastline of California. We also have a grant, Operation Stone Garden. These grants have great names. Stone Garden, it's like the bandits we name, robbery, they all have names. But Operation Stone Garden is with Customs and Border Protection, and they give us money to help Customs and Border Protection to secure the border along our waterways. And so I tell you all these things because I want you to get the sense and the understanding of how closely we work together with all our federal and state partners. We all work together. That was the one positive thing I think that came out of 9/11. Prior to 9/11, we did not work together. A local law enforcement would not even talk to the FBI. We just didn't have a good working relationship. Today, that's changed, and particularly in Orange County, we're working very, very closely hand in hand. We also have our training academy, and the Orange County Sheriff's Training Academy in conjunction with Santa Ana College. We have one of the premier academies in the nation, and we train not only our own personnel, but other agencies in the county and in LA County use our academy. It's a 6-month-long academy. It's what we call a full stress academy, which means we yell at people when they're in there. We put them under stress because we have to have people that will not break when things get tough. And so we get a very small group of people. You get so many applicants, we get very few at the end that can get through that process, that can get through the background process and become a deputy sheriff. But we're very proud of that academy. It's well done, and we get some great candidates out of there. I'm also the coroner. That was something I had not done in Los Angeles. That was a new mission for me. And we handle, I think it's about 4,000 deaths a year through the coroner's office. I have a person that manages that office, and we have a pathologist. I don't do autopsies. We have a pathologist that does that. And the only time I get involved directly is if there is a death at the hands of law enforcement, be it our agency or another agency. So, for example, the case in Fullerton, the Kelly Thomas case in Fullerton came to us, and there's a review of that where the pathologist will report out to me on what they believe the manner and cause of death is. That's the only thing that the coroner determines, is the identity of the decedent, the time and date of death, and the manner and cause of death. We don't look into anything else. That's done by other investigative agencies. So it's a very important function, and if there's an incident where one of my officers someone has died at the hand of one of my officers, there is a pathologist hired by the district attorney who investigates that incident, so there's no conflict of interest. The public might ask, why is she overseeing her own department in terms of that, and I don't. The district attorney does that investigation. Gosh, what have I missed? We have homicide investigators. We have the only bomb squad in the county, so we handle all of the bomb threats anywhere in the county, even where they have their own police department. It's a cost-saving measure. It doesn't make sense. It takes a lot of training to make someone a bomb technician, a bomb investigator, and so it makes sense to share that resource, and we share it free of charge to anybody in the county, any of the other police departments in the county. Crime Lab. We have the Orange County Crime Lab. It is one of the best crime labs in the nation. We are internationally accredited. Not all crime labs are. We are on the cutting edge of DNA and how we the volume of DNA that we handle. Typically, most counties, most agencies will handle DNA on violent crimes. We also do DNA on property crimes. If you catch one burglar, they're usually good for 100, 200, 300 burglaries. So we also have expanded that. Now, it's not without a cost. How many people watch CSI? Come on, I know somebody. Okay. It doesn't happen in an hour. We don't wrap up the case in an hour. It takes a long time. We don't have all that fancy equipment. We have some of it, but not all that fancy equipment. But yeah, it's costly to analyze DNA, but it's costly for a reason. We have to have a scientist look at the DNA samples because we don't want to lose that as a piece of evidence. We're very careful to make sure that when we're analyzing it, that we're analyzing it correctly. You've heard about mistakes that have been made, and we certainly don't want to do that. So that's why it's costly, and we check and double check and triple check. And again, we have people that come in and inspect how we do our work, and that's how we get accredited. It's a voluntary accreditation, by the way. We don't have to. It's voluntary. And so we submitted for that because we want to have that great reputation and protect people who are not guilty as well. So I think I have given you kind of a brief overview of what we are doing. Now let me talk about some of the challenges, and I'm sure you read about them. Of course, number one begins with a B, budget, budget, budget. My budget, I had to cut $53 million out of my budget year one when I first got into office, and that was a challenge. So I looked at ways that I could bring revenue into the county, and one of the things I did is I entered into a contract with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. These are detainees. Let me explain. When someone comes here, commits a crime, after they have done their sentence and they're determined to be here or suspected of being here illegally, once they finish their sentence, they become a detainee with an immigration hold. They are not prisoners per se, but they are detainees. So they have different rights than someone who is in my jail as a criminal. So ICE would pay me to house them while they go through deportation proceedings. And so we have brought in the last 3 years, let's see, I want to say about $45 million, that revenue that we would not have had otherwise, which also allowed me to keep my jails open and fully operating and not have to do early release. So now we are still battling the budget. We are largely funded by Prop 172. It's a half-cent sales tax. So 5 years ago, when people quit buying things because the economy was declining, that money goes down, and that's my budget deficit. So we also cut costs in terms of our staffing. I laid off about 150 people, and I also changed the classification of some of our folks that work the jail. We used to have just all deputy sheriffs and sheriff special officers in the jail. I created a new classification that was cheaper, and that's correctional service assistant, and that has saved us $7 million a year there. So I've looked at everything that I can do to cut or to raise revenue to manage our budget while not impacting the public. And that is that's good and bad, because if everything's going fine, you think that we're appropriately funded because we're still providing the services. But the bad thing is there's only so long we can do that. So I try and communicate, that to the public. Right now, we're doing okay. We're negotiating with the county for our budget right now, and I just came from a meeting where I talked about what we need from the county to continue to provide the services that we do. But of course, everybody is in that situation. It's not just us. The other challenge that kind of feeds into that is you've heard of the prisoner realignment. And there's a lot of misnomers about that. These are the people that would have gone to state prison, but now they're coming into the county jail. A lot of people, and really I think the press has gotten this wrong in a lot of ways, and so we're trying to tell the public what it is and what it isn't. In October, prisoner realignment began. If you recall, the state has been sued for lack of medical care in the state prison. People that go to state prison, anybody traditionally who gets sentenced to a year or more goes to state prison. That was the old rules. Regardless of what crime they committed, they'd go to state prison. Now, if you are a nonviolent, non-serious, and non-sexual offender, you would come to the county jail. So we didn't get a transfer of state prisoners into our system. It began October with people sentenced in Orange County for those 3 non-crimes would come into the county jail. But what we also got were the parole violators. The people who had been in state prison were paroled, and if they violate that parole, instead of going back to state prison like they used to, they come into our jail. So now, about a year and a half, I had 4,700 inmates, and last weekend I had 6,300. So we're growing, and we're having to deal with that population. The whole concept, though, behind, it's called AB 109, is the assembly bill that changed the law to allow the realignment, to allow counties to take those prisoners that would have gone to state prison. The whole idea is that locally we could do a better job of rehabilitation. and I think we can. It's going to take us a while to get there where we need to be, but we've come to a realization that we just have a whole lot of people in jail for a very long time, and the same people are coming back into the system. So we've got to put some investment into rehabilitating people so that they don't come back into our jails. I like to say I'm the only businesswoman in Orange County that does not need more customers, and I don't. I would never will. I mean, there will always be crime, some level of crime, but there are some individuals, particularly narcotics offenses, those kinds of things. Our veterans that are coming out, they have some issues. Our mentally ill population, those are some of the folks that I think we need to target to not come back and get them connected to the appropriate program. We've already had those kinds of programs locally before this realignment, and that's why it was felt that we could expand upon that and do a better job. We do get some money from the state, but the money is not enough to keep everybody in jail. So what we are doing is we're doing a lot of alternatives like electronic monitoring, where we put a bracelet on you and we can track your movements, but you're not in jail. But we know when you're going outside of the areas where you're supposed to be, or you're not following the terms of your probation, if you will. We're also doing community work programs. These are people who, instead of coming to jail, they're sentenced for a crime, they have to show up and provide work for the county. They're not on a chain gang kind of thing, but they come and they do things like brush clearing for the fire authority. They do a lot of work for the Public Works Department. We use them to wash our cars, that kind of thing. They're not in jail. You're not having to pay a lot of money to take care of their medical care and their food and all of that. So we're just beginning along this route of dealing with this new population. I think it's going to take a couple of years for us to, figure out and how to expand upon our rehabilitation so that we don't have these folks coming back into jail. We also are dealing with, I get asked a lot, do we have a drug problem in Orange County? What do you think? Yes, we do. I don't know a county that doesn't, unfortunately, have a drug problem. I think that because we are a wealthy county, sometimes people think that we're immune to it. We're certainly not even close. What's the most abused drug now, do you think? No. Nope. No. Prescription drugs. Prescription drugs. You may have heard of the doctor recently and that was getting prosecuted. The DEA, I met with the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, and that is a new initiative of theirs to focus on physicians who are overprescribing medication. And some of it is people doctor shop going from one doctor to another, to another, to another, but some of it is, quite frankly, doctors have found a way to make a lot of money without working very hard. And they're writing prescriptions in parking lots and that kind of thing, out of cars. So I think the DEA has decided to take a stand on that. Oxycontin is one, widely prescribed for pain medication. People get addicted to it. And that's why a lot of our youth are now, there's a resurgence in heroin because they can't get Oxycontin anymore. So you see the problem. Marijuana is still a problem. I am not among the group that believes we should legalize marijuana. I don't think it will do all the things that people say it will do. I think it'll hurt our nation. I think it'll hurt our youth. And I don't think they're bringing forth another initiative to legalize it this year because they're kind of fighting amongst themselves, the legalization folks. The other thing that is happening, of course, the drug cartels are involved in trying to get our youth addicted to heroin and those kinds of things. They've done it. They started out along the southwest border, and it's like marketing. They want to get people hooked so they have some customers. One of the reasons why we have this problem with the influx of drugs is because we're the #1 customer of illegal drugs in America. So I was talking about rehabilitation efforts in the jails, looking at another way to deal with that population. As we learn with gangs, that's the other thing I get asked, do we have a gang problem? We do have gangs. It's not the same as it was in Los Angeles. It was a much more deeper and widespread problem, but we have gangs here. But just like in gangs and drugs, you know, you can't arrest everybody that's using drugs, and you can't arrest everybody who's a gang member and think, gee, that's going to solve the problem. We have to do some intervention, some interdiction, some rehabilitation. We have to address the problem both with the arrest side and with the intervention prevention side. And so we are doing that in terms of our drug program. One of my big initiatives is to embark on an education program for who? Parents. Parents. Sometimes parents don't know what's coming into the house. I've been in this business a long time. I've seen a lot of different drugs, but the drugs, the paraphernalia that my deputies are taking off the high school campuses, I don't know what it is, because there's always a new iteration of drugs, and we have to keep our parents informed about what to look for. One of my deputies was talking to a woman who was concerned about her child using drugs, and she said, you know, I don't want to drug test him because I don't want to invade his privacy. And he said something I thought was pretty good. He said, why don't you look at it like this? When he's out with his peers, wouldn't it be nice if he could say, gee, you know what, I'd like to join you in that, but I can't because my mom drug tests me. Giving him out with his peers, right? Give him an out. We have a program called Drug Use is Life Abuse, and I have a Sheriff's Advisory Council, and they fund that program for us, and that pays for some of my deputies to go out and do this training and to work on campus with the kids and develop that trust relationship. And we have some of our high school students that are our ambassadors, and they come to our council to tell us what's happening on the campus. And they say, we asked, well, how long would it take for you to go out and buy drugs? Oh, you know, minutes. And these aren't kids that are in trouble. These are kids that aren't involved in that. They can get it that quickly. They know, everybody on campus knows the parents that allow the kids to come over and party and drink, that provide alcohol. So there is that going on. So we try and provide our deputies on the campus so they can work with the kids and prevent problems before they occur. So we're engaged in a lot of stuff. I haven't covered all of it, but I've tried to hit the highlights. And I'd like to, first I'd like to say I'm really proud to be your sheriff. I'm having a great time. It's challenging times for all of us, but you know, there's always new challenges around the road. They're not worse, better, they're just different. And one thing that law enforcement has learned is just as we have to partner with our federal and state partners, we cannot do this alone, and we need the public assistance with us, and we certainly get out. I try and get out and talk to the community, keep everybody informed about what is going on in the community. And I also get asked, well, why do you think Orange County, you know, is so low in crime? And I always say, you know, when the crime goes down, law enforcement says, well, you know, it's because of our great work. When it goes up, it's other factors. Right? You've heard that. Really what it's about, in my estimation, it's the public's involvement. And in Orange County, the public is engaged. And that's the fact. The public's engaged. There are tons of programs in this county, tons of people that want to do good and help others, tons of people that want to get involved and not just sit on the sidelines and complain about how bad things are, because none of us can do it alone. We need everybody working on it. So with that, I want to thank you for having me, and then open it up if we have time for questions. Okay.